Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome everybody to Nightlight. So glad you could join us tonight. It's going to be a fun show. I want to thank Ken Quiethawk first off for his amazing intro. He and his wife are native storytellers, and they have made an amazing career of preserving that tradition and sharing it with humanity. And check him out. He's on the internet. They have CDs with their stories, and it's an amazing way of learning about history, cosmology, and ways of life that far surpasses the textbooks that we have out there these days. I have tonight a cool guest. I have Carmen with me, and she's written a book whose title entranced me, and I had to read it. So I had to read it, and I did, and I decided it was a great book to share with all of you. It's called A Year Without Men. After decades of fighting to free themselves from male-dominated social and economic structures such as glass ceilings and pay equality, women still struggle. But many are poised to rise up with innovative ways to approach the many problems facing today's world. A Year Without Men is an essential guide to every woman's success and liberation. Using the events of a very painful year in her own personal and professional life, her husband left her, her consulting business took an unexpected hit, and she faced a serious health scare. Business consultant and life coach Allison Carmen explores the forces in women's personal and professional lives that hold them back. As her book Subtitle, a 12-point guide to inspire and empower women, she offers simple, practical tools to help women to look within, to find their own values, morals, and passions, to work on their skills, to call on other women, and to forge new ways to do business. Together, women can create new ways to earn money, new ways to look at beauty, and so many other new ways to be in the world. Allison holds a BA in accounting, a JD of law, and a master's of law in taxation. And after working for a large law firm in Manhattan, she founded her own law firm and built a successful practice focusing on real estate, corporate mergers, and acquisitions and taxation. After 15 years of practicing law, she transitioned her practice into business consulting, business coaching, and life coaching. Do you see a theme here? Allison is also the part-time CFO of the Motherhood Center, a mission-driven for-profit business that functions as a day hospital for women with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. She's a really cool person, and I'm so excited to have her on the show. Welcome to the show, Allison.
Oh, Barbara, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I love the title of your book, just as many women do who have come to a point of time in their life when A Year Without Men might be a really good thing. Not necessarily, but that element of competition is always there on some level. It it intrigued me, and your 12-step program was fabulous, and I think especially in today's world, so many women are at a point in time where they really want to magnify the talents and the gifts that they carry within, and it's so hard to find them, and it's so hard to find ways to express them, and not to compete, but just to be a partner in so many aspects of life. Your book gives so many wonderful tools for people to expand their lives and become better people. And you don't have to have been through a divorce or a breakup or whatever to incorporate these tools into your life, because they really are the kind of tools women should be given from childhood, and they aren't.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I was, brought up to think that I was going to get married and I would have a career and I would raise my family, and somewhere along the line for me, I didn't realize all the things I had sacrificed within, and it wasn't because I was married. It was because of the system, the patriarchal system that's around us, and how hard it is for women always to have a voice in the world. We try, but there's a system that welcomes men more. There's a system that pays men more. There's a system where more men, lead the big companies in the United States. They lead more management positions. They're on the board. So, after a while, I think a lot of women turn around and they say, well, it must be me. It must be me because I have the education and I'm smart and I have what it takes, yet I can't seem to get ahead. And I think when we start to kind of tap into the system that's around us, but after we look at that, we look within and we start to discover who we need to be and who we truly are and how we can make our way in the world, things really start to change. And for me, this happened with a very bad breakup, but like you said, a 20-year-old could read this book and be empowered, or someone who's in a beautiful marriage can be empowered. It's just about tapping back into ourselves and getting rid of the doubt and getting rid of the fear and being truthful with the world around us, and then finding a way that we can move forward.
Yeah, I think there are roles that women have been in. I can remember when I went to college, a long time ago, you could be a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher, and maybe an airline hostess. But that was it. You were expected to, have a career sort of, but the goal was get married, have children, support a husband, and die. And it not quite that, fast, but it was sort of like there were no opportunities. And when I see the opportunities that are out there today for women, it's just so amazing that I find also the other thing is we are put into traditional roles instead of allowing ourselves to discover where our talents and our gifts lay and follow those, and follow your bliss, follow your joy, follow the things that give you joy and make you a more joyful person to be around.
Yeah.
Quite often,
yeah, absolutely.
When I counsel people, it's sort of, they'll say, am I on the right path? And it's like, are you happy? Are you joyful? Are you celebrating and being creative? And if you're not, then you're not on the right path. So find the right path. It's not that you've made a mistake. It's just that you've taken your time to get to where you have to follow that path. That's all.
Right. But what I think happens, if you look back in my generation, we, women and men graduated, like in 1991, they graduated from college at equal rates. So we were led to believe, right, that you could be anything. You could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. You could be an accountant. And the problem with my generation is that, yes, you can be all those things, but it doesn't mean you're going to get ahead. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy to get clients. It doesn't mean you're going to be made a partner. So it's kind of like, and then if you look at women who are young today, sometimes they get upset thinking, well, what do you mean I don't have opportunity? I think everyone has opportunities, but I think the patriarchal system makes women doubt themselves, right? And what happens is the more you doubt yourself, you just keep thinking you're going to find a way within a system, and then you're not thinking about happy. You're not thinking about joy because that road looks so uncertain. You don't even know how to get there. And I think that's, what women really need to overcome. So many of these things that we've been taught to really, like you said, let go of them and ask ourselves these questions. But again, if we're afraid of the unknown, if we're afraid, to speak up, if we're doubting ourselves so greatly, we don't get to those questions. And that's what I really want to see women do, to be able to have the strength and resilience to ask themselves what will give them bliss, what will make them happy, and then find a way and find the resilience and courage to actually pursue those goals. That was really my hope and dream for the book, that it would help women do that.
Well, I think you've given them some, really good suggestions on how to find those aspects within themselves, and it's just, I know so many women who are in their 50s and 60s, and they now have the freedom, because unfortunately most probably their husband has passed on or whatever, and it's like, now you can be yourself. Now you can find out who you are. And I think that's the other thing. It's never too late to find yourself. And
I agree. I agree so much.
So that it's kind of like, okay, so let's find out what gives you pleasure. Let's find out what gives you joy, and then how can you? To me, it's if you are following those areas and elements that give you joy, the universe sort of presents you with the opportunities to move forward with them. It isn't so much you have to hit your head against a brick wall. It's create the joyful radiation within yourself, and it magnetically draws to you the opportunities to express it in other ways. So it's an exciting thing. I mean, you've given people the permission to discover the magic that they hold within them.
And the first thing we need to do, right? The first thing we need to do, though, is to look at our relationship with uncertainty. Because, like I said, a lot of people are so afraid of what they don't know. They're afraid of a new path. And they won't even allow, again, for them to say what will give me joy, because they believe they won't be able to attain it at some point. Right? They believe, like, what's the point of asking that? I'm not going to be able to go out in the world and start a business. I'm not going to be able to ask for a raise. So it's like we need all these principles to build up within ourselves, so we have the courage to ask what will bring us joy, and we have the courage to take that first step. And that's what happens when we're afraid of the unknown, we're afraid of uncertainty. We don't ask the question, and we're too afraid to step forward. And so that's my hope, that the first step for all women is if we could conquer this fear we have of the unknown, because a lot of women are going to have to achieve their goals in a different way. Often the straight line that men are able to take, a woman cannot take and have the same type of success. Some women can, but a lot of us are going to have to be innovative. A lot of us are going to have to start our own businesses, or find a way to go to college when we have kids, or start a side business, or be creative and intuitive and use these extra tools. But if we're afraid of what we don't know, we're never going to take that first step. And again, that's the first chapter of the book. I discuss how we could overcome our fear of the uncertainty, so we could ask these beautiful questions that you're talking about.
Yeah, it to me, your book was just, it rang so true. And, I'm older than you are, so, I've seen how these things progress and how they work. And it's just, to me, in today's world with young people coming out, even out of college, I have a granddaughter who's 14, and when I talk to her, it's like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And she says, I don't know, but I know certain things that I like and certain things that I don't like. And I said, well, that's a great foundation to build on. Just please realize that in your lifespan, you will have at least 5 or 6 major careers. So whatever you choose first doesn't commit you for the rest of your life. And
it's so interesting you say that. Yeah.
Well, it's when I look at your bio, I mean, lawyer, and then and you write, and you've worked with the Motherhood Center, and you've had I think it's 5 to 6. They did a study a long time ago. It's probably even more major careers that you can have in your life, so that so that you're not locking yourself in. And if being a wife is one of those things that you want to be, go for it. But don't lose yourself. And I think that's what happens to so many people. If people continue to follow their dreams, no matter what their relationship is, with whoever, whether it's a partner or whether it's a job, if you continue to follow your dreams, you can't help but have a rich life. If you let go of your dreams to help someone else find theirs, it never works. So
Right.
keep your focus on where your pathway is, and it can always be with another person. I'm not saying it can't be, but make sure that you keep your own dreams going, because that is your life jacket. If something happens, if that's your life jacket, and you did a magnificent job of finding your life jacket, and your book certainly chronicles your journey, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, but it was really hard. I have to say that, I want to use the word hard. It was very challenging because even though I did all these things, I relied a lot on my marriage, and I never in a million years thought my husband would leave me. And I was not out in the world the way he was out in the world. I always worked part-time and I had all these passions and interests, but he was really made more money than I did. And when he left, I really had to scramble. I mean, I was very lucky that I had these degrees and I had a practice and I had books, but I was not ready to financially take care of myself. And, it's so interesting, too, because when you look at statistics, and I think you were referring to this earlier, at the age of 65, 49% of women are unpartnered. And it's so amazing that, in your 20s, you think you're going to get married and have these kids and have this great marriage and rely on somebody else. And no one ever thinks, wow, when I'm 65, most likely half the women that I know will be unpartnered. And then as it goes on, it gets even worse. By the age of 85, 60% of men are still partnered, and only like 18% of women are partnered. So like you said before, it's like our destiny at some point to be independent, to be financially independent, to live on our own. And so what do we make of that? And like I think you're referring to, it's that you have to keep a sense of yourself, and you have to keep your dreams alive, and you have to keep everything within you like up to date and real and curious, because if you don't, and if you're relying so much on somebody else, one day you might find yourself in a very compromised position, compromised financially, or also compromised because you didn't pursue your life's dream. And I was half in and half out. And it was really only because I was pursuing my dreams, even though I was focused on my children, that I was able to kind of regroup in my early 50s. But it's something that we need to remember. And every time I have a young client and they start to fall in love, I always say, keep your dreams alive. It's not even keep your career alive. Keep your dreams alive, because that'll keep you curious. That'll keep you out there. That'll keep you doing something that matters. And, meaning comes before anything. And if we have a meaningful life, then we have a fulfilling life. And sometimes we give up because it's hard. We give up because we think we're supposed to play this certain role. But when we hold on to our true selves, then we will always find our way. And again, another dream for the book is to have people to see this. And like you said, it's not about being without a man or being with a man or being in a relationship. It's just without a sense of ourselves, we kind of lose that meaning, and meaning is everything. And honestly, out of all the things that happened, it was so devastating that my husband left, but I returned to me. And there were pieces of me that I was hiding, and there were pieces of me that I forgot. And I wasn't always out there in the world the way that I wanted to be, the way I needed to be. So this was heartbreaking. This was like scorched earth, but it also was a rebirth. And for me, it came with so much pain. And people don't need, like you said, that you don't need to go through something like this to kind of connect with yourself and to pursue the life you want to have. And that's what my hope was, that people would read the book and they would kind of awaken to that, along with many other things they read or come in contact with, so they don't have to be heartbroken to find themselves. Because that's a really hard way to do it. And I don't recommend it, but that's what happened to me. And I'm very lucky and blessed, right? But, there's an easier way and an easier path.
Well, it's one of those situations where it was a wonderful thing to happen to you, but you're not going to write a thank you note just yet.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. No, I don't. It's so funny. I've gone on a lot of interviews, and people say, isn't it better now? And, I'm of the belief that does the best always happen, or you have to make the best of it? It doesn't matter, because you have to make the best of it. Like, this was the hand that I was dealt, and if I'm not careful, if you're not careful, what happens is that you tell the story so long, this was wrong, this was bad, this shouldn't have happened, that you get lost in the story, and then you stay in this place of pain, and you stay in this place of broken ideas and expectations. So for me, I'm just trying to say that I'm strong enough to handle what happened to me, and I accept it. I might not like it, and I believe in maybe, and I believe in hope, and I believe that the life in front of me will bring me towards manifesting an abundance. And I try not to write, think about the thank you note, because sometimes that just kind of messes me up a little bit. But I know some people are able to do that.
No, well, yeah, I'm not one of them. I've had a couple of situations in my life that were devastating, and in retrospect, they were the best thing that could have happened to me in my whole life, because they did get me to where I am today, which I love. But I'm not writing thank you notes. I'll have to evolve more spiritually next lifetime to be able to do that. But it's not this lifetime for sure.
It's hard.
Another target area that another person that this book would be perfect for I know a lot of people that have spent their life being a mother and a wife, and taking care of the kids and making sure the kids were out and married and happy and all of that. And it's empty nesters who have not pursued any of their own wishes and hopes and things like that. They've just been focused on their children. I've told people who were friends of mine, as I saw their kids getting, into high school and stuff like that, start working on yourself, because when the nest is empty, you're going to look around and say, well, what do I do now? And
you're so right about that.
Empty nesters are prime target for this book, because quite often you have sacrificed part of yourself, part of your own hopes, wishes, and dreams, and when your children are in college, when they're pursuing their own lives, when you've let go, we never let go, let's be honest, but when they leave us and they let go, you suddenly have an empty house and an empty life, and there's no more volleyball practice, there's no more band orchestras, there's no more clubs, there's no more anything. And it's like, holy crap, I've just given 20 years of my life, or 30 depending, and now what do I do? And your book is perfect for those people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What's so interesting about what happened to me is that when my husband left me, I had one daughter in college, and my other daughter was 15 years old. And so I had 3 years of kind of reinventing myself, and now I'm an empty nester. The book came out, and 2 months later I became an empty nester. But because of the work, and because of the book, and because of everything that's happened, I do miss my children, but I'm not having that experience, because I'm so busy with all this meaning and this thought and these creations that I made the last couple of years of my life, and before that too. So again, I agree with you 100%. It's like this book is a pathway to not only, dealing with all the things that we face in corporate America and empowering ourselves, but it's also a path to finding ourselves. And you're right, there are moments in our lives where we can lose ourselves, and yet, bringing up kids is a beautiful investment, no regrets, but you hit a point that you're like, now what? And so how do you kind of invest back into you and deal with the parts you haven't dealt with and figure out how to get back out into the world? And I agree. I think it's the perfect book, and it's funny that it's the book that's guiding me right now, and I've really had a beautiful transition because I've been working on these things for a long time. So I've been an empty nester since September, and I kind of experience it differently. Like, again, I miss my children, but my life is very full. It's full with meaning. And meaning will give you everything you need every day.
Absolutely. And, you are, I think people have to realize that they are their own lifesaver, life preserver, and they are their own teacher. And it's amazing that if you sit down and you start to look at what did I want to do, what aspects of life can I get back into that are going to give me power, to empower me to be me, instead of just curling up in a ball someplace and reading romance novels. And there's nothing wrong with romance novels. I prefer science fiction, but you know, but the reality here is that women have, in my opinion, a greater sensitivity and creative energy than men do. And therefore, that energy can be an amazing tool to find within yourself and then to become creative with it. I started a podcast. Never dreamed it would become a network. A little overwhelmed with that, but it's sort of like if you know, it's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And it's
Right.
true. I rewatched that movie the other night because it was kind of like we have inspiration within us constantly, and we don't always listen to it. But if you listen to it, and even if it sounds silly, do it.
Yeah. And
You know.
Yeah. And the two things I find that happens is that the reasons why we don't do it at any age, but especially, you know, when a woman gets to a point of when she's an empty nester, one is we'll say, I'm out of time. It's too late. I don't have what it takes. And the other thing, again, and which we know that time is just a story, right? It's just a story that we tell about why we can't have the things that we want, because time has nothing to do with it. Age has nothing to do with it, especially with all these platforms and being able to do things online. It's like you don't even have to travel to start a business. You don't even have to leave your home to make money. It's really an incredible time for people of all ages. And again, the other thing is fear of the unknown. And that is the thing I find gets most people. Most of the time, people do not start something new because they have an idea, and then they look into the future, and all their fear and all their doubts create a projection of, it's not going to work out, I don't know how to do it, I'm not sure how I'm going to get there. And they don't realize that the dream is the first step, and uncertainty is our best friend. What we don't see is that what we don't know is going to save us. The unknown is where it's at, because if you want to fulfill your dreams, it's in this place that you can't even see. But because it's so unlimited, that's where it is. And for me, the reason why I was actually able to survive my husband leaving me, I was able to get a CFO job for the first time, is I live in this place that I call maybe. And what maybe is, it's the hope within the unknown. What happens is many of us live in the maybe not. It won't work out. Maybe there's something bad's going to happen, and we forget that in the unknown, yes, the maybe not exists, but there's also this maybe that has the miracles. It's this maybe that has all the possibilities, but for some reason, our mind always goes to the negative. And for me, because I was so afraid of the unknown, I couldn't play. You know, a lot of people are able to be positive thinkers, but for me, if I try to be positive and then something bad would happen during the day, I would get negative. And that's what happens too. People are like, oh, I'm going to start this thing, and the minute they can't get financing, or the minute someone says no, they get negative and they give up. And for me, this idea of maybe has always brought me to this place of not knowing, kind of builds me up, because it makes me realize if I don't know, then what I'm dreaming is still possible. And I just want to give your listeners this beautiful story, and this is the story that really changed my life. And I know many people have heard the story before, but for me, I was a negative thinker. I was not a maybe thinker. I was always worried about what was going to happen next, and if I didn't know, I projected it was going to be bad and it wasn't going to work out. And then one day I heard this beautiful story about this farmer, and he had a horse, and his horse ran away. And his neighbor came by to the farmer and said, you have the worst luck. And the farmer said maybe. But the next day, the farmer's horse came back with 5 mares, and the neighbor came by to the farmer and said, you have the best luck. And the farmer said maybe. But the next day, the farmer's son is on the horse. He falls off and breaks his leg. And the neighbor comes by and says to the farmer, you have the worst luck. And the farmer says maybe. But the next day, the army comes to take his son to war, but they can't take him because his leg is broken. And the neighbor comes by to the farmer and says, you have the best luck. And the farmer says, maybe. And in the Taoist tradition, the story literally means things are neither good or bad. But for me, and probably because I'm from the West, this story gave me hope. Because the minute something bad happened, if my horse ran away, it would never occur to me that he would come back with 5 mares. And so I started to play with this idea of maybe, like if I lost clients, I'd be like, well, maybe I'll get a new client, or maybe something else will happen. Or if I didn't make enough money, or whatever would happen, instead of getting to this place like things are bad, they're not going to work out, I would literally just start to say maybe. And all of a sudden I would see my mind would calm down. I think maybe is the most magical word in the English language. Like I know they have magical words in other languages. I think in the English language it's maybe, because when I would say maybe, my mind would settle, my fear would settle, and I would become naturally more open. And then over time, I would just ask myself, what's my biggest fear? And if my fear was about, let's say I was starting a business, I'm afraid I'll never figure it out. I'm afraid I'll never get clients. I'm afraid no one will ever buy my product. And I would actually question my fear. I would say, are you absolutely certain that fear is true? And that's the beauty of it. It's like our fears aren't certain either. When we recognize that, we feel relief. It's such a relief to know you're not doomed. And then you say, what else is there? And then you start to ask yourself, maybe. You start to say maybe statements like, maybe I can do this. Maybe things will get better. Maybe I can accept this and still be okay. Maybe I should call my friend. And if you do this practice every day for about 20 minutes, what happens is that all of a sudden you start hanging out in that place where people with faith hang out. You start hanging out in uncertainty, and all of a sudden you just shift. You're not desperate. You don't feel despair. And hope becomes your middle name, because you know you can't be certain of. And so you live with knowing that things could not work out, but you also live with knowing that it can. And once you give people a little light and a little hope, everything changes. So anybody, no matter what age they are, if they start to live in this place of maybe, and uncertainty becomes their best friend, they will start a business. They will go back to school. They will do anything, because they know that anything's possible. And for me, I truly believe that if I didn't have this practice, I don't know how well I would have done when my husband left. It was this idea that uncertainty would lead me someplace else that gave me courage every day. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I mean, I wrote another book called The Gift of Maybe, but it had a lot of meaning to me back then, but my husband leaving was the hardest thing that ever happened to me. And knowing that I didn't know what the future would bring, and I knew that life had maybe, brought me hope even during my darkest hour.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's something that it's a wonderful practice. I totally believe that if somebody tells me I can't do something, I immediately look at them and say, well, of course I can. I may not do it well, but I can do it. And there is that aspect too. But I remember when I created the deck of cards, I painted them with watercolors, and after once they were published and everything, people were looking at them and saying, I can't be watercolor. I said, oh, I'm sure it is, because I was there. And they said, but it doesn't, watercolor's not supposed to look like that. And I said, nobody told me that. And so my watercolors look like oil. And, it was kind of like if somebody had said, oh, no, that's not the way it's supposed to look. I think my response would have been, well, that's the way I'm making it look. So that it can do that. And even with my website, when I wanted to change it and redo it, I had a technician that was going to do it for me, and I told her what I wanted, and she said, "Oh, you can't do that." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, websites aren't done that way." And I said, "Is there a rule?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Then either you'll do it, or I'll find somebody who will do it." And I love my website.
But that's tremendous conviction. You're somebody that sounds like you hold your own even during adversity. You hold your own when people question you. People like me, I didn't always have that power in me. What would happen is if those things happen in my life, even though I know I wanted it away, even though I know I wanted my website this way, I wanted my cards this way, the minute, and a lot of women have this, the minute we're questioned, because we don't always have the same opportunities, because things that happened to us when we were a kid, we start to doubt ourselves. And so what happens is then all of a sudden we're battling the positive and the negative. People who are positive like you or have the conviction, you can hold it. But those of us who can't, right, we need another way. So for me, what I would do is I would go into maybe, and I would say to myself, well, maybe I could still do it this way. And maybe what I'm thinking is correct, and maybe I should hold on a little longer. And what that does for me is that gets me where you are. And so because sometimes the uncertainty of someone doubting you, the uncertainty of not knowing just kind of knocks us out. And then we're like, I can't do this. I'm just going to forget it. I'm not going to be able to go forward with any of these things. But with maybe, it allows you to kind of hang out with someone like you and say, okay, I'm gonna move forward because maybe everything is still okay, and maybe I can still accomplish my goals. So it's interesting that maybe can build people the same courage as those people who can be positive thinkers and have resilient and conviction. Because what happens is our doubt and our insecurities, they knock us out, and then we never try. So I think that you're lucky to have that conviction, because I wish I had that most of my life.
Well, it wasn't always there, trust me. But
right.
I probably went through a maybe stage, in there, and maybe is still a wonderful word to have at hand when, everything falls apart, and it was, well, maybe when I put it back together, it'll look even better. And it's maybe is a wonderful word to use, and I think that when people are going through difficulties, when people are going through tough times, and a lot of that is going on today, I think that your book helps people to find the way to create a better independent themselves than if life were going on normally, a lot of people would be caught up in the routine and not have the opportunities to sit back and take the time to go through your 12 steps. And I think
also times are uncertain, right? Times are also really, really uncertain. And so what's interesting too is, like, even my first book, like, people are more interested in my first book than they were 7 years ago when it came out, because life is just as uncertain as it's always been. But I think many of us feel that every day looks the same, right? We think the days, because we don't see things changing so drastically. And the pandemic, I think, has made a lot of us feel, right, that oh my goodness, life is more uncertain than it's ever been. But like I said, it's always been this uncertain. And so people are more interested right now in building inner resilience to deal with the pandemic, and to also deal with, a lot of people are making changes in their lives. What makes me happy? What brings me joy? Which brings us back to your original thought that that's one of the most important things, no matter what's going on in your life, to go back to you and ask those questions.
Oh, absolutely. And, for me, having creativity in your life is one of the most important things. And you don't have to be painting the Sistine Chapel or anything like that, but to have a creative process to me, the creative process opens the portal to great expectations within yourself, to allow your dreams to start flowing in a more productive way. So whether it's doing jigsaw puzzles, whether it's organizing your medicine cabinet, I don't care what it is, so long as you do something creative every day, you are opening that channel to allow the magic that you have within you to flow into your life and enrich it to a greater extent. And that is also giving you the courage to step forward, to try to answer some of the questions you've had about yourself, and to create a life that is rich and amazing for you, and that's following your dreams. And I think people's expectations and stuff like that about life. Sometimes you talk about expectations in your book, about how they can set you up from time to time.
Yeah, expectations. What they do is that's the story of our lives, right? Of what we expect. especially if you're very committed to family and you're committed to your children and you're committed to life a certain way. When something happens in our lives very unexpected, our expectation of the life we thought we were going to have can really stop us from growing and stop us from moving forward. And there was a point in my life that I saw that. I was like, I can either keep telling the story that my husband shouldn't have left me and this marriage was supposed to last forever and we were going to retire together, we were going to have grandkids together. If I don't let go of that story, then I'm not going to be able to create a new life. And sometimes our expectations, like you said, when you're talking about creativity and curiosity, we don't even allow ourselves to explore new things because we have this view of our life. This is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how it is. But these, again, are stories about what we think our life is today and what it's going to look like tomorrow. When we break that and we ask ourselves these greater questions, like you said, about joy, about creativity, about what gives my life meaning, then the expectations quiet, and then we become closer to our authentic selves, who we really are. And one of the most, I think, important things I did is that I questioned my expectations every day. And even today, I could find myself, if I'm not careful, I can get lost in that even today. Even just, we just had Thanksgiving. And, the holidays can be challenging. You're in a 30-year marriage, and all of a sudden you find yourself, not at a 40-person Thanksgiving. You're out to dinner with both your kids. If you keep telling the story, he shouldn't have left, I miss the holidays, it's right on, right? Then it's a miserable day. But if you're able to say, okay, I'm not happy about this, but I accept this, and this is my new life, and that's not my life story anymore. My life story is unknown. My life story is about meaning. My life story is about creativity, curiosity. My life story is about going down the block to a French restaurant with both my kids on Thanksgiving. When you start to kind of like reinvent it, life will follow you, or you'll follow
Absolutely.
life, whichever way it works.
Yeah, it's funny because when you think you have things figured out, and this happens to me all the time, I hit the brick wall on a regular basis. When you think you have things figured out, and it's like, ooh, this is magic. Magic is going to happen, and then it doesn't quite happen, and you're disappointed. But then 3 weeks later, you look back and think, what was I thinking? That was so limiting. That was so restrictive. How could I possibly have thought that was what I wanted in my life? And I have found that having expectations, while you can't avoid them, they happen. But when you kind of lock into them and sort of click them into place and say, this is it. This is what I want out of life. Then you limit yourself because there's so much greater potential out there. This would be nice to pass through. I've been fortunate to have a lot of very interesting people in my life, and some of them it was really good that they came and went, and others not so much. But I was engaged to a guy for a while, and found out that he was cheating on me all over the place, and we had already bought wedding bands and stuff like that. And so when he moved on, and he moved on fast, I took the wedding band that I had bought him, and on the outside of it I had engraved, "And this too shall pass." And beautiful. I wore it for a very long time, because I wanted to remind myself that no matter how bad it is, it'll pass. No matter how good it is, it'll pass. And even cooler stuff will come. So don't lock yourself in. Allow yourself the freedom.
And that's what expectations do, right? That's what happens. We think we're safe. We do it, right? We write the expectation and the story to feel safe, because deep down we all just want to be okay. Again, it's always about uncertainty and certainty. But what we do is we turn our back on our lives, and we don't see it. You're so right. We want what feels right and safe so badly that we stop seeing the depths of our lives. We stop seeing our passions. And on some level, I did that in my life, which is unbelievable to me, because like you said, just when you think you know it, you hit a wall. I was out there helping people. I was teaching people about uncertainty. I thought I was rocking and rolling, and everything was great. And when I hit that wall, I saw that I had a lot of expectations, And the biggest certainty in my life was my marriage. And so I was feeling and I was teaching, but I wasn't looking at that place I was clinging and that I was attached and I was not out in the world the way I needed to be. And it was a very hard lesson to learn. And that's why it's so beautiful when we do the work now, when we let go now and we don't turn our back on our life, we turn our back on the expectations and we open to life. And, no regrets. This is where I am today. But what a beautiful thing to do in your 20s or your 30s or when you're 60. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But we all have so much depth. And if we're breathing, then there's this beautiful life waiting for us in every moment. But we just have to be willing to not reach for the known and always go for what our heart tells us.
Yeah, that's the important thing. And I think that, I have people that, I have friends that are locked into, being a wife and being a mother, and that's their life. And on occasion, I will talk with them and say, well, once everybody's, once the nest is really empty, what do you want to do with your life? You are an amazing person. What do you want to do? You don't put your feet up and just wait for the Grim Reaper, because with your kind of luck you'll be 105 and still waiting. So don't sit on a silver tray and wait for something, because your rear end is going to tarnish. And so let's do something with life. Let's find what makes you happy, what makes you joyful. And then she comes back with, well, being a mother and being a wife. And that's fine, but there have to be other dreams there too. There's creativity. There's something here. And there are people that just don't want to look for it. They don't want to give it a try. They don't want to stretch themselves. And sometimes it's okay to say to somebody, then so long as you're happy, that's all that counts. I would rather see people like that finding something that gave them joy and that they started to do, so that when they had the space and time, they could flow into it with greater ease. But the universe is unusual, and we all have a contract of some sort, and sometimes it's meant to hit brick walls enough times so that just short of a concussion, you get the point. So.
Yeah, but what I saw about me, I actually saw that it was always, especially as a woman, it was always very uncomfortable to start something new. And so when the going would get tough, I had this marriage that I could go back to because it felt safe, it felt certain, because change comes with being uncomfortable. Doing something new, starting a business, writing a book, even going to a painting class, whatever it is, there's a level of being uncomfortable that we need to accept. And a lot of us, the minute we feel uncomfortable, it makes us feel uncertain. And when we feel uncertain, we get scared, and then we believe, this is not good, this cannot work out. I'd rather go back home and put my feet up and live the life that I know. And we always forget that nothing is certain, that the thing we're betting on might not be the best bet. And that's the saddest thing of all, when you look at life and you bet on certainty, and you realize betting on certainty is not your best life, was not your most meaningful life, was not your most fulfilling life. And the worst of it all is it might not even be the life you end up getting. And to me, that's the most heartbreaking thing. Like, was I living my fullest life? Like, I was betting on the certainty of a marriage, but I was backing away from things that made me uncomfortable. I was backing away from certain passions. I would have actually never taken the job at the Motherhood Center. I was their consultant, and my husband told me he was leaving, and 2 weeks later, this woman I was working for, I was just her consultant, called me and said, I need you to come in more often. Had my husband not told me he was leaving, I would have said no. I would have thought to myself, why would I ever take that job? I've never been a CFO before. That I would have had a million reasons why. It would be uncomfortable. I'd have to do this. This could be unpleasant. And honestly, like, being the CFO of the Motherhood Center has been one of the most rewarding positions I've ever held. I mean, I've been on my own for a really long time. I mean, I was a lawyer at a large firm, and then I went out on my own. And it's really only the second time I've really worked for a company in a part-time capacity, but it's an all-woman company. And I've had the opportunity to work for this wonderful visionary and to kind of move forward with women's health and meet these amazing people and learn so many new things. And it was very uncomfortable, but I only did it because, I almost had no choice, right? So I think we have to know that uncomfortable doesn't mean bad, and uncomfortable doesn't mean wrong. Uncomfortable is part of the path when we're changing our lives. And again, choose the meaning, choose the passion, because certainty feels good in the moment, but it doesn't last because it's not the choice of our best life. And it's funny, again, I was teaching uncertainty, and yet I was choosing an aspect of certainty in my life. And like you, I hit the wall, and I didn't even see it. If you would have spoken to me on June 29, 2018, I would have taught you about uncertainty, and I would have told you about my life, and you would have been, oh, my goodness, look at her. Look how strong she is. Look how she's living. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it. And when he left, it hit me, like you said, a ton of bricks, that I was playing it safe. And that safety was keeping me small in certain ways. Again, I'm not happy it happened. It broke my heart, but it also opened my heart. And I kind of wish I had opened it on my own years before.
Well, sometimes, we need help. And, wasn't it fortunate he was there to give you the help? Again, no thank you note. But I every now and then when a major lesson hits me, it's like, okay, I got it, but there's no thank you note.
But you're right, and that gives people permission, right? That gives us permission, like in a way, you're saying to me, you're giving me permission to look at it and say, I see what I had to work on. I see my growth, but that really hurt, and no thank you note to you. But it gives people permission to look at it in a different way, right? Because sometimes the pain is so great that we don't allow the lesson. And sometimes the anger blocks us moving forward. But when you allow someone to, like you just said, when you allow someone to look at their lessons, but you don't have to forgive somebody, it gives us permission to have another experience. And I actually remember, I don't talk about forgiveness in the book, but I remember when he left, I was so into my spiritual practice that I did everything to try to forgive him. I think I went to forgiveness before I went to dealing with my own anger and dealing with my own hurt, because I felt so guilty that I was so angry. I felt so guilty that I wished horrible things. I had never had, people who know me, like, oh, you're such a nice person. I had the worst thoughts I've ever had in my entire life that I almost felt guilty about having. And this trying to forgive somebody when you're not ready is just, it's a dead end. It's a dead end. And so I've gotten to a point that instead I've worked on my anger, and I've worked on my expectations, and I've worked on moving forward, and I've worked on not thinking about him and thinking about me. And, if forgiveness comes in this lifetime, it'll come. But right now I just say, universe, God, you can handle that piece. I can't. And right, no thank you note. And like you said, maybe this lifetime you and I will get to it, or maybe it'll be another life.
Well, I have found that I've been in this field for, over half a century now, and I have learned that in the universe there is a balance, and if you get out of the way, the balance is always done far better than you could have done if you had wanted to get even. And I remember, I had a breakup a long time ago, and it was a bad one. And his family kept saying, one of his relatives offered to break his legs, and I said, no, I'm going to take care of it. And they were in the mafia, and I really was pretty sure they would break his legs. And that was not the body part I would have wanted broken, but, so, but I kept saying that I'm going to take care of it. And after about 6 months, his aunt called me and said, we're holding our breath. We don't know what you're going to do, and we're really worried. Are you going to have him killed? And I said, I don't think so. I'm not real sure. And she, then she got really upset. She said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Absolutely nothing." Mm-hmm. And she said, "What?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm not going to do a thing. I'm going to let the universe take care of it." Mm. And the universe did take care of it. He had an accident, and the body part I would have broken if I could have got damaged. And it's like, I would have been arrested if I had broken it. But, so it was a matter of the universe saying, we'll get it. And you don't always see the balance. That's the part that really upsets me. I want to see, I want to be justified. But the universe, there is a balance in this world. And behavior toward other people, it comes back. There is that balance, and it may not even be this lifetime, but that balance will be carried out. And if you get out of the way of it, you don't have to take responsibility for doing something bad, because then it'll come back at you. So,
I just find the miracle for me was the balance in me, the balance of getting out of my own way and finding that there was a better way for me to live in balance. So I think that's to me the biggest miracle, when I'm able to kind of let go of the expectations. And it just reminds me, there's this beautiful woman. Her name is Nightbird, and she is a singer, and she was on America's Got Talent, I think. And she sang the song, and they loved it, and the balloons came down, and she had cancer, and she had to drop out afterwards. Her life's dream was, she always wanted to sing and have people listen to her. And she said, how can the universe give me all of this and cut my hands off? Because, she's so ill that she can't go out and sing, and that she has all this recognition. But she gets to a point, that she writes that, maybe the miracles, are bitter, and sometimes they're sweet, but we can't kind of look at them that way. We just have to recognize when they're here and not judge them and allow them. And so when I look, for me, part of the miracle of all of this is my own inner balance, like to not have to hide pieces of myself, and to be able to love myself, to have an opportunity for me to begin again, almost like as a child. Almost like a new opportunity, a new start, a new beginning. And I just try to focus on that, because I find when I focus out, I can't make sense of it. Because like you said, you don't know what happens, you don't know which lifetime. For me, it all just seems too big for me. But when I'm able to kind of go back to me and say that this is a miracle, like it might not be how I thought it was going to be, and it might not be exactly what I asked for, but what a blessing to find myself so deeply in this lifetime. So I try to look at it like that. The other way I just get lost, for me personally. So I just kind of keep going back to me.
Well, I think the universe always gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want. And sometimes, sometimes we need to have the space to discover there are parts of ourselves that we need to work on. And you speak in the book about hiding parts of yourself. You want to go into that a little bit and explain to people what you mean with that?
Yes, I think what happens is that, especially as women, I think in society, we see things that we believe won't be accepted. So maybe we hide, and it comes again mostly from childhood. Maybe we hide our opinions, or we hide how we look. We wear certain clothes. We hide parts of ourselves because we believe if people really saw all of us, then we would be rejected. And we don't realize that you can't hide from the sky. Like, we don't realize that we think we're fooling everyone, but what happens is when you hide any piece of yourself, you're not your most empowered self. It's almost like you think you're getting over on everyone, but you're not, because the minute a piece of ourselves is cut off, no matter what it is, we lose a piece of our power. And it just reminds me of the story of a friend of mine. She went on this interview, and she got pretty far down, kind of almost to the last round. And in the end, they didn't hire her. It was a sales position. They hired someone else. And when the recruiter called, the people and said, I thought you loved this person. Why didn't you hire them? And they said she never smiled. And because she never smiled, we wonder how clients would look at that. And when I went back to my friend and I asked her, why you didn't smile, she said, because I was afraid they would see my crooked teeth. And so that's how it goes. So in a way, like she was hiding, right, something she thought that she would be rejected for, but in a sense, she was rejected because she's a very bubbly person. She didn't, and that's what a lot of us do. And, when I look back on my life, I think that I hid parts of my body. I hid some of my talents. I wasn't always out in the world because I felt uncomfortable. And when my husband left, I had no choice. Like, it was just like bare all, right? You're out there. There's nowhere to hide. You got to go out. You got to make a living. You got to, show up everywhere. You got to give your opinion. You got to make money. So it's so interesting that all those pieces kind of the light just shined on them. I never realized that I was kidding myself, right? Again, you can't hide from the sky. But sometimes it just becomes more apparent. But when we can do this work ourselves, then we don't have things like this happen. When we could do this ourselves and we're fully empowered and we're fully there every day, like you said, the universe helps you and you find a way. But when we hide pieces of ourselves, it's like we're only out in the world 75%, 50%, and we wonder why our lives aren't working out. And so for me, like coming forward with that and realizing, look, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. And even beyond that, you don't want to get to a point where you have no choice to reveal everything about yourself. You want to be able to do it in a more gentle manner. But for me, like I said, the places I was hiding, it was just the rug was pulled out and there I was. And as much as it hurt, it's been a blessing because your life is you have so much more grace and ease when you're okay being yourself. It's almost like you just show up. And it's a lot easier than hiding and wrapping yourself in this and not speaking up and not being who you truly are. So, the book has a lot of exercises and methods, but it's a beautiful thing to check in with ourselves and see, what am I not doing? What am I not saying? Where am I not going? Because I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid I won't be accepted. I'm afraid I'm going to lose something. And we don't realize that we're already losing. And the win game is to show up and be ourselves and let the universe guide us and be guided, again, by truth and meaning and passion and joy. And then we really have the life that we desire, and we can create so much more in our lives. And, again, that's another hope from writing this book. I really hope that people choose it because, again, when you don't choose it and you have a very difficult situation to face, it's harder to go through it. I was just very lucky and blessed to have had the support I had to get through it and to have the spiritual practice. And so today I hide less. I'm more uncomfortable. I have pain, but I'm not hiding, and it's freeing. You feel free, which is beautiful.
Oh yeah. Well, I think what's fascinating, what I found interesting is that your career in and of itself started out in a male-dominated world with your law degree and your master's degree, and then working in Manhattan, and then you went to your own firm, and then your practice, focused on real estate and corporate acquisitions and taxation, and then you moved into business consulting, business coaching, and then life coaching, and your whole career is a mirror of going from trying to fit into other people's concept of what success is to evolving into what you feel success is, and it's going from a corporate attitude to a spiritual attitude. I think it's an amazing trip that you've been on, and your career just mirrors the changes in you and how you have, gone into a more spiritual, valid expression of yourself within your reality.
Yeah, and I appreciate that observation. I really do. And what's so amazing is that, and also to have the opportunity to go back into corporate America with a deep spiritual practice and a deep confidence and resilience, and then to land at an all-woman company, to really not, to have this structure where it's so collaborative and so understanding, and yet you're working with people who are so smart and so innovative that to really get the opportunity to see what it's like when you respect yourself and those around you respect you. And, you know, being a woman is not an issue at this company. It's so fascinating, right? It's like that if someone doesn't like you, they don't like you, but it's not because you're a woman. You're not undermined because you're a woman. You're not held back because you're a woman. So to kind of go back into it and be so different, to go back into a company and have that experience, it's been really healing. And it just really shows you when you do the work, you do end up where you're supposed to be. And I have no idea what, you know, will happen next in my life, but it's been very empowering to have, you know, look, it's unfortunate my husband left in so many ways, but to be able to do the work and then to see it play out in such a beautiful environment, I feel very fortunate. But again, that comes with doing the work, right? It comes with a lot of letting go and a lot of processing and a lot of self-love, but everybody's capable of it. We're all capable of it. We just have to be willing, right, to go on the path and look within and find what is really important to us. And again, like, uncertainty and being uncomfortable is part of the path, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be deeply painful or bad. I think, like you said, it's deeply painful when we hit that wall, and we often hit the wall when sometimes we're ignoring what's singing within us.
Oh, yeah, and I think the other part, too, is that especially with relationships, when you're young or whenever a relationship starts, people most likely are focusing on what their dreams and what their wishes and what their hopes are for the future, no matter what your age is. And there is a light that radiates from you. And so often in relationships, women especially will put their light out to help their partner's light shine. And what happens is you stop being the person that they were attracted to in the first place.
Yeah.
And if you keep that light lit, then there is a better chance that the relationship will last longer.
Isn't that ironic? Isn't that ironic that you think that you're doing everything to keep the relationship going, and giving up who you truly are dims the light, and the light is the thing that emanates. The light is the thing attracts. The light is everything. Our light is everything, and we dim it so easily by thinking we're doing the right things for the people around us or society, and we don't realize that the light is where it all starts. And that's so beautiful that you brought that up.
And you know, it's interesting because when you do give up your dreams, then you create a form of cancer, and you know, it will eat at you, and so you definitely become less of a person because you've let go of your dreams, and you know, okay, some people will say, well, my dream is to have a good marriage and have a good family life and stuff like that, and that's great. There's nothing that says you can't do that, but you also have a purpose within the lifetime. Your spirit is here for a reason, and that reason is to grow and to utilize the tools and the gifts that you have within you. And if you're not answering that, there will be a feeling of emptiness that will eat at you. And I'm not saying you're going to get cancer, but I am saying that will be something that will, you know, you will regret, and that regret can create problems at some point in time. So don't give up your dreams. There are always ways of keeping up. If you dream that you're a writer, for gosh sakes, write a book. You know, I was about to say any idiot can do it and publish these days, and that's true. But you know, put something out there. Get your thoughts out there, and you know, there's nothing that stands in your way. I mean, okay, neither you nor I are ever going to be Miss Teenage America this life, but
are not.
But
well, you just ruined my dream.
Well, let's get another one. It's just, you know, there are realities that face us, but I mean, I'm 77, And I have always regretted not taking the piano lessons my mother tried to force on me when I was 12. So one of my bucket list things is I'm going to take piano lessons. And I may discover that I am not the virtuoso that I thought I was, but I am going to take the lessons and learn how to play Silent Night. And if I can get that far, I'm gonna feel like, okay, I've been there, done that. Now on to the next. But it's sort of like, there are simple things you can do in your life that will not get in the way of your job of whatever you are doing. And
I agree. But I think sometimes what happens is that the reason we don't do it is because we look too far ahead. I think we psych ourselves out. Again, it's about uncertainty. We look ahead and we're like, well, how am I going to learn that, or how is that going to be successful? And again, it's not about that. It's about step one. It's about, like you said, connecting. What's important? What's my desire? And then look, what is the need, right? Look beneath the desire and find out what the need is, and then take the inspired action and don't worry about it. I think you and I both, we started podcasts. Like when I started my podcast, I had no idea. I just got a microphone and I found a program, and I didn't worry about anything. And had I worried about it, had I thought about stats, had I thought about, production, I would have never gotten there. And I just did it. And sometimes I listen to my early podcast now and I laugh. I'm like, oh my God, listen to all the static, listen to all the noise. But I did it from my heart. I did it from my dream. And it's still, it's still a passion project today. But, when you hear from people and you're like, oh, thank you so much, that really made my day, or that changed how I saw something, I realized, like, wow, like, I'm able to give a gift to people every week, every other week, because I didn't worry so much about it. I didn't look too far ahead. I went with what my heart told me. So we have to be careful. Let's not look too far ahead. Yes, when you're starting a business, you have to look to see, you have to do projections. You have to raise a certain amount of money. But after a while, we psych ourselves out. And so we have to be really careful to stay closer to the dream. And some of the most amazing, successful businesses that I have worked for over the years, they were crazy ideas. Like one of my biggest clients ever, he started this company, and he said, I'm going to create a company that's going to have health coaches. And he sold the company for hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was like a crazy idea 25 years ago. But he's really one of the, the grandfathers of the health industry today. So it's so interesting. So we shouldn't worry so much. And we should do the things that people say are crazy and just stay with them. And yes, we have to be accountable. We have to pay our mortgage. We have to take care of, but I think we suffocate our dreams because we worry too much and we're afraid of the unknown. And we don't realize that when we reach and when we dream and when we realize uncertainty is our best friends, that's when we create miracles in our lives. Every book I've written, every podcast, everything I've done has been a crazy dream. And now I'm working on projects, and people are like, you're crazy. And I say to myself, I'm so happy they think I'm crazy, because that means there's a good chance that it's going to get done. I have a feeling, I know you're the same way. Like, I'm at a point, I think that we all go through a maybe phase, and now, like, I'm at a point where I'm exactly like what you said before. When people question me, I've built up through maybe the resilience, and I'm just doing it. And I'm actually acting as if these projects are happening. There's a movie project I'm working on, a Netflix project I'm working on. I call it Netflix. People are like, oh, you have a deal with Netflix? I'm like, no, I don't have a deal. But I call it that because I'm creating something, and so it's also exciting. If we don't get stuck, it almost can make our heart beat double time with excitement. It's like we psych ourselves out. And and so I have a feeling you and I are very similar that way. Like, we just have all these projects going on, and we just go with them, and we don't think about, we don't crush ourselves by worrying about every detail. We follow the passion and the inspiration, and then we see what happens. And that's how I live my life at this point. But it took a lot of maybe, like you said, as well as you, it took a lot of maybe to get to the point where now when people question me, I move forward like you. And it's such an amazing way to live, because you're living in your zone.
Oh, yeah. Well, and when I started Nightlight, I have intentionally left up the first podcasts because they were so bad. I figure people can go back and listen to them. I mean, they were really bad. but they're still there. And it's kind of like, go for it. And, this is where it started, and look where it came. And I don't know where it's going, but it's a lovely ride. And the other thing that you've touched upon, and I kind of want to, put a highlight on it. A long time ago, I had a husband who did a lot of the graphic work for me on the website, and when he passed away, I wasn't, I didn't really have the tools to do it, and there was a person who said, she could do it for me, and I offered to pay her, and I found that I wanted to know how to do some of the stuff, and she said, no, it's too hard, you can't do it. I'll do it. Well, she stole my website. And she changed all the passwords, and I wasn't able to get in. So I had to pay somebody to hack my own website to get my website back. And then when I finally found a webmaster that I could trust, I said, look, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to do the graphic work. I want to be able to put stuff up. I want to, when it comes to the heavy-duty put the bones in, that you do that. But I want to learn how to, and you know what? The stuff that I was told was so hard that I couldn't do is a piece of cake. And it was sort of like she told me it was too hard, so I didn't even attempt it.
Yeah.
And I so now when somebody tells me something is too hard, I respectfully, I say, with great respect, thank you for that advice. Where's the book? I'm going to find a person that can teach me this, because I will not be defeated by saying to somebody that I can't do this. That's ridiculous. I can do it. Yeah. Do I want to take the trouble to learn it? Maybe not, but I can do it. So and I think so many people are stopped dead in their tracks when someone says it's too hard, you can't possibly do it.
Yeah, right. Especially
Bullshit.
Women, right? Because we're filled with so much self-doubt already because of again, you see the male counterpart, he achieves more. You see your husband, your boyfriend achieve more. You hear what how women are judged all the time. We have to, and that's what the book is about. Like, how do we transcend that? How does the voice within us become the loudest voice in the room? And that's, you just told the perfect example. Like, when your voice is the loudest, you listen to people, but you follow your own determination more than anything. So I have a similar path. People are always saying that's impossible, and I always say maybe that's not impossible. And I hate to use that expression, but it's like you lean in. You just keep, again, I don't mean it the way that the book Lean In talks about it, but you just lean into your life. It's your life. It's meant for you. And if your heart's open and you lean in, you just keep saying yes, right? And you just keep moving forward. You make me laugh. I remember my first podcast, again, like, I had I looked about what everyone else was doing, I would have shut down. I actually wrote it out on paper, and when you read it, it's so funny. You hear me, and I say, "Hello, my name is Allison Carmen," and I'm like reading because I'm petrified. But
that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, and
that's
you just
exactly what I did.
Do it. And honestly, my mother listened to the podcast, and maybe my friend. That was it. But you just keep going, and the more your heart's open, people eventually they find you and you find them. It is such a beautiful life, this life, if we just lean into the love that we have for ourselves and others and our projects. And I love that. I love the fact that it's unfortunate that you had that experience, but that but you know what happens, unfortunately, I know people that would have an experience like you and they would shut down. So those are the moments. Like, it's funny, like the most challenging moment is the moment of elevation. It's the moment when real things are achieved. Because I know people are like, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this anymore. I lost the website. I'm just going to give up on it. And that's the moment where you have to find the way. And for me, like, now I'll just move forward and maybe use maybe, but it's about believing in who we are. And that's what I kept trying to write in the book, to show women a path to believe in their voice and believe who they are, because I think women are geniuses. I think they're business warriors, and I actually have met smarter women working at this company than I've ever met other people in my entire life. So it's a really beautiful journey when you allow yourself to be on it.
Oh yeah, and that was another case of I was grateful for the experience because I learned something important. But again, that was a no thank you note. It was
Right.
like now it's like find somebody to teach me this, or find somebody that can tutor me through this, or find a book I can play with, because there are no limits at all. And I think
Right.
that it's important for people to understand that there are no limits. And if somebody tells you there's a limit, they're trying to stop you in your tracks, and that's when I put my shoes on and say, oh no, I don't think so.
Right.
And I think everybody has that within them. It's a matter of opening the door and finding where it is, and then putting it on and going out and conquering the world. And I will promise you, the brick walls are still there. You're going to hit them, but it's just a matter of backing up and realizing that you don't always have to go through the brick wall. You can go over it or around it or under it.
Exactly. And that's the thing that we forget. We're so linear. We want certainty. Again, it's about uncertainty. We want certainty, and certainty is a straight line. And sometimes the door is shut, and a lot of us, when the door is shut, we give up. And so for me, even to this day, like sometimes I'll be totally determined, and sometimes I'll need maybe. Sometimes I'll hit a wall, and I'll say, well, maybe there's another way. And just even saying that opens me up. It's just, again, we just have this tendency to want to know, tendency to feel safe, wanting someone to tell us we're okay, and that has to come from within. And for me, at this point in my life, being okay is following my heart. That's when I know I'll be okay. When I go against my instinct, that's when I feel shaky. But for a long time, again, my marriage was my certainty. And like I said, anytime we choose certainty over meaning, certainty over joy, certainty over passion, we end up at the short end of the stick at some point in our lives. And again, it might not be easy, but it's definitely a worth life living. A life worth living.
Oh, absolutely. and we are schooled and brought up to have tunnel vision as far as our life as a woman. And as soon as you take off those blinders that are restricting you to that one pathway, you have the world open to you. I mean, today a woman can do anything, almost anyhow. And it's sort of like, there's so many choices out there, and you do as many as you want to, but there's so many women today that are feeling imprisoned almost because of the pandemic and everything. And this is I tell people I am grateful for the pandemic because it's given us a chance to get inside of ourselves and really work on ourselves and discover things about ourselves. And I think one of the other areas I really want you to go into is the compare and despair. And I think everybody has to pay attention to that because, we are so unique and we are also precious and we are perfect. And we are made to compare ourselves to illustrations and people on television that are airbrushed and all sorts of stuff. And people have to accept their beauty as they are and realize that because of our uniqueness, we are beautiful. And, we may not be the same shape or size or whatever as other people, but there's a beauty in us that will radiate if we acknowledge it.
Great. I just want to go back to the pandemic for one thing, and I do think the pandemic has been harder on women than men because of child care issues. A lot of women were in the service industry. So I do think the pandemic was very challenging for women, But I do believe that it is a time to recreate, to be innovative, and to look at our lives and say, what's going to help us move forward. And again, if we could have a better relationship with uncertainty, I think that it is a time, an opening period for women. It's just we have to be willing to take unique paths. Some of us, we're going to need to work from home and start a business. Some of us are going to try to work out a hybrid situation at work. Some of us are going to have to go back to school and just find a way. And so I think the pandemic, if we could heal our relationship with uncertainty, we're going to connect and we're going to go into maybe and we're going to find a way. When it comes to comparisons, I have to tell you, when my husband actually ended up moving in with a 34-year-old woman quite soon after he left me. And, if I was ever going to sink into comparisons, that was going to be the moment. And I remember that my friend called me up, and it was a male, and he said, you have to, the only way to get revenge is to look great. And I remember thinking to myself, how is that going to be revenge? My heart is broken. So I'm going to look great, and then my life's going to be great. And and he actually did say that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to get holistic revenge because, I'm so into health food and stuff. So I went to this holistic spa. And I was so messed in the head. It was like a couple of months after he left me. And I really went to the spa thinking it was going to help. And, of course, the universe always has something else in mind. And the owner of this holistic spa was an 80-year-old woman and a great healer. And, of course, I started to cry the minute I got in there and started talking about my husband, not my facial pores. And she was very deep. And she ended up giving me a book that she had written called Absolute Beauty. And when I got home, I was hysterically crying, and I got into bed, and I started reading the book. And if you look in the book, it talks about the definition of beauty. And if you look in Webster's dictionary, the definition of beauty is that which gives pleasure to our own senses. And I remember thinking to myself, what? Beauty is what gives me pleasure. Beauty is what gives my eyes pleasure, my smell pleasure, my taste pleasure. And I'm thinking to myself, my whole life as a woman, I've been plucking my eyebrows. I've been trying to dress a certain way. I've been uncomfortable in every room I enter because I think I need to be a certain way to be loved and accepted and to be beautiful, when the joke is on me, because Webster's dictionary says that beauty is what gives me pleasure. And it sounds something like so simple, but the simplest things in life are like a perspective shift. And I remember I went out walking after I had this realization, and this woman was walking towards me. And she was blonde, and she was young, and she was tan, and I guess at the time she was who I imagined my husband was with. And I looked at her, and all of a sudden, instead of having these thoughts of, I should look like that, I need to look like that, my first thought was, how she looks doesn't give me pleasure. And I wasn't putting her down. It just wasn't what I felt was beauty. And I shifted my eyes to the trees. And all of a sudden I got pleasure from the trees. I got pleasure from the sky. And that was like the first time that I started to look at what beauty was differently. And it really was a life changer for me. And when I start to slip, when I start to go on Instagram and I start to see, how women are being portrayed or how I should wear, what I should wear, I actually stop myself and I say, Allison, is that actually giving you pleasure? And it rarely does. The things that give, and there's nothing wrong with, people love clothes or they love makeup. It's literally what fills you up. And so when I go off track, I say, what am I looking at? What am I comparing? What am I comparing myself to? I get back to a place in my heart and I say, what gives me pleasure? And sometimes giving pleasure to me will be, getting dressed up. Sometimes pleasure for me is taping a podcast. Sometimes pleasure for me is going out with my friends. But when you focus on the true meaning of beauty, you stop comparing. And again, like you said, compare and despair. It's like trying to compare an apple to an orange. And it is actually the biggest way women are disempowered in our society, is that we're taught to compare ourselves and to feel less. And it's an illusion. And it's not a winning game, because every day something can make you feel bad. Instead, you could switch that, and every day you could connect with what you think is beautiful, what beauty truly is for you, and you can have a totally different experience. And again, it's not that I don't slip. It's not that, I don't have a bad day, but when I bring myself back, I walk into every room knowing that I am enough, that I am lovable, I am valuable, and I go more quickly to the beauty of the moment and what gives me pleasure than comparing myself and putting myself down. It's one of the things that got me through the last couple of years. And it's truth, too. It's not even like I'm making an excuse or I'm rationalizing it. I'm really tapping into what my essence finds beautiful, and it's a very meaningful way to live.
Oh, absolutely. And I've found personally that about every 10 years, I absolutely reinvent myself. And looking back over the decades, I can see how it happened. And when a long time ago I had a car accident and I was forced to stop teaching. I taught special education for 25 years. And as soon as I knew that I was not going to be able to go back in the classroom, I gave every pair of high heels away. I gave every dress away and every skirt away. And my mother was horrified, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "They aren't me anymore." And I am comfortable. I am sloppy in many ways, but I am comfortable, and I don't feel I have to be a certain size, and I don't, so I allow myself to become, over time, changing every decade or so, and it really is kind of interesting because every decade I could see a major change in my life, and it may not be the same for everybody, but it's just what I've noticed about my own life because that's what I know most and best, and it's sort of like I find that I am becoming another person and excited about the change because there was a person I told you when we were talking the other day that my boyfriend from 60 years ago reconnected with me, and it's a sweet story, and he connected to apologize for how he broke up with me. He said broke up, I said dump, but and it's really interesting because we both have become different people because of the 60 years in between, and it's really it's fascinating how we do change as we get older and wiser, hopefully, and so I think every person should recognize the fact that with at least every decade there is an expansion of the person that they are. There is an enrichment that is profound, and if you can acknowledge that and see what you're building on, it makes life so much more exciting because there's plenty of room. I haven't gotten to the top of the pyramid yet, so I'm still working towards the capstone, and so is everybody else. And
I find that so beautiful. That's really so beautiful that is your perspective, because I think the worst, most painful feeling in the world is not to be okay with who we are, not to be okay with what we look like, not to be okay how we're aging. And it's not that, again, you can't do things for yourself. Of course you can if they give you pleasure, but it's the rejection of oneself that I think is the biggest pain in our lives. And I think it's the prison. And we create a prison with an open door, and we sit there because we think how others see us. We think how the media portrays women. We think we haven't accomplished. We think this, we think that, and we feel so small that we sit and we're not free to live our lives. And for you to talk about that freedom and the reinvention, the freedom to look at ourselves anew, the freedom to change, the freedom to dig deep, it is so glorious and beautiful, and that's the trap. That's the trap, and again, it's a prison of our own making. Are we going to accept ourselves for who we are and keep expanding, or are we going to reject ourselves and as we age get smaller? And that's one of the biggest crimes of humanity, right? To be here on this earth, to be in this body, to be able to live each day, each breath, and to be feeling like you're in a prison that you can't be yourself. So I love that. And again, my hope for every woman is that each breath is an expansion. And each day is an expansion, and each year that goes by, there's more freedom, not less. And that, again, that is that's the ultimate. And it's so funny to be so heartbroken, and I still have pain in my heart, but to feel like I'm living in that prison less. And it's funny, you would think that I would have more rejection from myself now, right? Like, my husband leaves, he works out all the time, he lives with a 34-year-old woman, and yet I feel better about myself than I did when I was in the marriage, because I think I have more self-acceptance for myself. So I'm 3 years older since he left, and maybe I'm 10 pounds heavier. I don't know. I'm not on a scale. But you know what I'm saying? Just to have that freedom. And I love what you said. Like you're living in an expansive mindset. And I wish and pray that every woman could have that experience, because you're right. Like, become juicier and wiser and almost better. And yet society is looking at us and saying, you're worth less, lack. And it takes a lot of strength and resilience, right? But it's the truth. It's like, if you're willing to buck the system and live in truth and feel it within, life is like a diamond. It's like sparkling. And so I who's ever listening, I just think what you said is just, we should all do that. We should do it every year. We should always be reinventing ourselves and celebrating ourselves. And again, we are in a prison with an open door, and it's hard to walk out, because society judges is so hard. But you know, when you're willing to let that go, freedom, and you soar, and you have these moments where you feel more alive. I've had more pain in the last 3 years than I've had my entire life, but I've also had more aliveness than I've ever had my entire life. And it's interesting how we choose to live, right?
I don't want to burst one of your bubbles, but we do get smaller. I have found that that we do shrink a tad bit as we get older, and I know the last time I got measured, you know, with a doctor's yearly visit, and he said, "Oh, you know, you've gone from 5'4" to 5'1", and I said, "Seriously?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, that's so great." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I'm now a petite." And he said,
"But that's
what?"
physical, right? Said, that's.
Yeah, I think it's I forget what petite is, but I finally have arrived at the petite place, so I don't have to take hems up anymore when I buy stuff. But it's sort of like, you know, it's I joke now to my son. I'm becoming a hobbit. If I live to be 150, you'll be able to bury me in a shoebox. And I don't think it goes quite that far, but you know, it is.
But there is, right? There are physical. Look, there are physical things that happen to us as we age, but
yes,
I think how we choose to see our life, especially as women, like we shrink. I think a lot of women, we start shrinking as teenagers, and we shrink our whole lives. And that emotional shrinkage and that spiritual shrinkage, I think that's our choice. And again, it's very challenging, because the world presents women with many, many challenges, but we don't fall, and we don't have to be small, and we don't have to act small. We can, we keep expanding every year in different ways. And I just hope that, you know, and that the fact that you say that you keep reinventing, it's a beautiful way to look at things. It really is. Well, and I just, again, like, yeah.
I tell my son I'm physically 5'1", but I have a 6-foot aura. So
that's the way to do it.
Yeah. So just, you know, give me room, because I will always need it. It I
love it.
It's sort of, you know, it's perspective. But the other thing that I want to sort of reiterate here, because I think it's so important. I mean, everything you've said is absolutely, you know, it's 100%. But I think the one thing that I would add to it is, don't ever lose your sense of humor, because if your sense of humor can get you through anything. And if you can use your sense of humor to get yourself through a lot of situations, you know, you know, you're golden. You really are. And I'm not saying you have to all the time be, you know, laugh. because that's not appropriate. Though I find the most fun to do is to get people laughing at a funeral. So, there is joy in laughter. Laughter lightens everything, and if you can laugh, then you can survive. And it's definitely, you don't try to tell somebody this, as their partner has just, passed away or whatever. You have to be tactful about it, but the element of laughter is so important to everybody's life, and with laughter comes healing, and healing is an amazing, laughter is an amazing healing tool. You had something in the book about doorways. About not being able to carry everything through a doorway, leaving something before you went through a doorway. Do you recall that?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to say about humor, you're so right, and I have to say that this is the second time we've spoken, and I think that you carry your humor very well, and it's delightful, and we all have to remember that as serious and as hard as life can get, there is this beautiful lightheartedness about life and this joy of laughter and even laughing at our own selves. I mean, I've made a lot of jokes over the years about my situation, and sometimes, you need just to laugh. Sometimes you need to cry, and sometimes you need to laugh, and they both are just as healing, when the time is right. So I really appreciate what you just said. And I didn't talk about humor in the book. I cried actually writing most of the book, but yes, humor is a very, very important thing, and whatever can make you laugh, whatever brings you joy is very important. As far as the doorway, yes, I think what happens is that, we're always bringing everything that happens to us to every moment. We're bringing our stress, we're bringing our worry. Like, we wake up in the morning and you spill your coffee and you're late and you're this or that, and by the time you get to your first meeting, that's all with you. And then you're going to snap at your colleague or snap at your kid when you get home. And we don't realize that we don't have to carry everything with us all the time, even if it's important. And, I was reading Mark Nepo's book. The name of the book escapes me right now. I think it's Awake. What is it? I don't remember the name of his book. He's such a fabulous, The Great Awakening, I think maybe the name of the book is. And he tells the story about a man who wants to paint his house. So he goes to the store and he buys red paint and he buys brushes and he buys paddles and he buys cloth and he buys all these things, and his arms are totally full. And as he goes to open the door to his house, he doesn't want to put anything down, and he's trying to open the door and he's carrying all these things, and all of a sudden he can't do it, and he falls back, and the red paint gets all over us. And the point for Mark, the story is sometimes you need to put down what you're carrying to enter. And it's so simple. And when I was going through this very difficult situation with my husband, I'd be crying and things would be so horrible. I had to go to a meeting. I had to go meet a friend. I had to go pick up my child. And so what I do is I always remember that I don't have to carry everything into each moment, even if it's important. And so I'd use every door as like a symbol for me to be aware. What can I put down before I go through this door? What can I put down before I leave my house? And it was such a beautiful practice, because sometimes you're holding something and it seems so damn important, but it's not very important for where you're going in the next moment. And what's even more amazing is sometimes you put something down and it feels so good you never pick it back up. Because a lot of our stress and our worries are just projections about the future, and we allow ourselves not to have that fear or worry. We feel so open and free that we're like, why do I want to hold that anymore? I'd rather be a maybe. I'd rather laugh. I'd rather focus on something new. So it's a really simple practice, but because there were so many doors, and especially during the pandemic, because most of us were inside, we were just going from one room to the next, it was such a great practice to have, to remember that before we enter the next moment, what can we put down? Do we have to carry everything forward? And we carry so much when we don't need to, and when we're free and when we're light and when we're open, we allow so much more. It's like we block so many possibilities because we think we need to hold on to everything that's happened to us in our entire life, and we don't realize that we could put it down and pick it up later and enter the moment free and new and open to create new things. So for me, I was able to do that so often. I was able to forget about my husband or ex-husband now for an hour or 2 hours. And then sometimes I wouldn't pick up some of those thoughts again, or I would just enjoy 2 hours and then pick it up again later. And I just think that we should all be more aware of what we carry and what we don't need to carry to the next moment.
Yeah, and sometimes, if something becomes habit, that it's just a part of us that we're trudging along with, and we don't need, it's become a habit that it's always there. It's almost a comfort, and yet I'm done utilizing this hurt or this difficult time. I really don't need to take it with me any further. It serves no purpose, and my back hurts. So
right.
Let's just let it go. And a lot of times when I have led meditations or an event where we're meditating and going someplace and doing something, and I always tell people, just let go of everything, the bothers of the day and the worries of the day, and when we come back, you can pick them up if you want to, but you don't have to. And quite often, by the time we're done with the meditation, I bring everybody back, and it's like, okay, scattered on the floor are all the things you left behind. What you don't want, you can leave here, and we'll sweep out later. And very often people would come up and say, I left some stuff on the floor that I didn't think I would ever let go of, but when you told me I didn't have to pick it up again, I didn't. And sometimes
because you experience the freedom.
Yes, sometimes we need to give ourselves the permission to let go of something. And you keep.
Amazing.
Well, sometimes you carry guilt about, for instance, a parent who's passed away and you didn't do all the things you wanted to and you could have, and things like that, and you carry that guilt with you. But your parent is already on the other side and doing wonderful things and doesn't really give a damn, and you're just punishing yourself for something that you did that you would never do again. So the lesson is learned, so you don't need to carry the guilt. And quite often, we have things like that we are carrying that have become a habit. And I love the visualization of putting it down and just not picking it up when you go through a door, because for a lot of people that practice for the first little while could really help them get rid of a lot of the stuff that they're carrying, a lot of the baggage they're carrying that they don't need. I mean, we all need an overnight bag as far as that goes, but we don't need a steamer trunk. So
you're right. You're right. And every time I pass by a door, I think about that. And, at first you're going to pick it back up. At first you're going to say, okay, I'm going to put down this fear or worry about my child or being alone or this or that. I'm just going to put it down when I go to this meeting. And then you experience some freedom, and you're like, okay, I'm done with the meeting. I'm going to pick it back up again. But every time you do it, every time you have this awareness of what can I put down for an hour, what can I put down, you keep asking yourself as you go through the door, that's freedom. Like you said, the openness, the freedom to not have to carry something so heavy. There are some things we don't pick up. Like there are things I still carry. I put them down, I pick them back up because I haven't processed them yet. But there's a lot of stuff that I've chosen after a while not to pick back up, and it's life-altering. And like I said, we think, like you said, we think like we need to carry these things. It's our obligation. It's our duty. We're going to figure them out. By holding it is how it's going to become better, and it's not true. Often it becomes better when we let it go and we accept it and we open up to something new. Like, life is changing, and sometimes we're not changing with life because we're so busy carrying everything from yesterday that we can't catch up to where life is. And so by putting it down, I find that I'm more open and I'm where life is. And so the more you do it, the less you're going to pick it back up. And like you said, it's a beautiful practice. And because there are doors everywhere, you make that the habit. The habit is, what can I put down? Every time I hit a door, is there anything I could put down before I enter this next moment? And then, like you said, you could commit to picking it back up. You could decide not to. It's just you're breaking that habit. It's because it's unconscious, right? You're not even thinking about what you're holding. but where you're holding you back. And that was an interesting lesson for me to see that. And I think a lot of my letting go happened through that practice.
Yeah, and another thing with people, and not necessarily with you, because I know you're still processing everything, but sometimes people hold on to relationships, their difficulties way longer than is appropriate. Yeah. And lots of times I tell them to have a funeral, and to literally have a funeral and dig a hole and bury objects or whatever, or pictures or whatever, or go to if you're by water, you can go at low tide and bury everything and then sit and watch the tide come up and wash it out to sea. Sometimes you need to do something physical to actually let go of something. And I've had funerals for a couple of people. They're still alive, but I had funerals for them because they were no longer in my life. And there was one that I really I threw a hell of a party for the funeral, and it was a great excuse to have a party. Everybody thought it was hysterical. We had a bonfire. Everybody threw a little something that I had saved from that person, and we said goodbye with a smoke, and then we had a great party. So sometimes, celebrating the end of a piece of our life and putting a good ending to it gives us the opportunity to start anew and find new stuff that you can celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't realize. I mean, things are types. There are all these different types of deaths, right? And I experienced the death of a marriage, and people experience the death of a relationship or the death of a job, but we linger. And I think you're right. I think the lingering, after a while, you process it, you go through the grief, and yet sometimes we linger too long. We linger because of obsessive thoughts. We linger because we don't love ourselves. We linger because we're not opening up. We still have expectations. So, yeah, there's a point where I think we have to accept it and recognize the death of whatever we experience. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because sometimes, to have a physical acknowledgement of that, like a funeral, or like you said, to bury something, or to do some kind of ritual. I think rituals are very important. They have helped me a lot over the last 3 years, different types of rituals, whether it be prayer or meditation or spiritual baths or whatever people do. But I think it's important to put the past to rest at some point, and I agree with you. And I think we linger too long often.
Well, I think one of the things, the rule that I have for me when I do this is that, while there are things that I will be throwing into the fire, for everything that I bury or throw into the fire or whatever, I am forced to give a positive that I got from the relationship, a positive lesson that I had gathered that would enhance me in future relationships. And while finding things to burn is one thing, that was easy. But my rule being that I had to have a positive, and I underline and put in capitals, a positive, not I will never do this again, but I learned that communication was very important, and that I am going to watch in the future to make sure that I not only listen better, but I communicate as well as listen, and those kind of things, because no matter what has died, it has taught you something of a positive nature to enhance your life. And it's
You're
important
right.
it's so important to gather those positives and treasure them, because you suffered for them. I mean,
you're absolutely right. And also we need to learn, right? Like it's funny, like so many things, the betrayal and him leaving and all these things. And I didn't leave, but doesn't mean that I didn't participate in certain issues in my marriage. And so, I got to look at parts of myself that I needed to work on, that I needed to grow, to elevate as a human being. And to not look at that part is to just repeat, is either to shut down, like you said, or just to repeat it again. And oh my goodness, for me to repeat that again, or for me to shut down, it almost feels like someone's taking part of my breath away. And it's painful work. You know, it's painful to say, oh, he left, I didn't end it, but look, I did these things. It's a very, but it really is what life's about. Because if you want to grow, you have to spend the time. So I think that's really important, I think also looking at the positives of what you had when the person was in your life and the positive on the lessons. But the lessons, you have to be able to look at your share, even if it was 20% or 25%, whatever it is. To grow as an individual, we have to be responsible for our part and embrace those lessons. And I think that's one of the hardest parts, especially when you're in so much pain, to look at what you did. But, you know, it's part of the juice, it's part of expanding as a human being. Because, like I said, I think the worst thing for me would be to not learn more about myself. Like, the most interesting thing, I think, in life is to understand ourselves. Right? Not for anyone else to understand us, but for us to understand ourselves. So I think what you said is really beautiful and poignant, and I think that's how we move on. We move on by looking at it and understanding ourselves and our role and our lessons.
Well, yeah, and I did, I usually ended with, I'm very grateful for the experience, but no thank you note. And,
You should write a book. You should write a book
I
that
should.
title. I'm very grateful for the experience and no thank you note. I don't know how many books you've written. Maybe it'll be your 10th, but I think that would be a great name.
Well, I have a lot in my head. I haven't quite gotten them on paper yet, but they're definitely there. We're really coming down to the end here, unfortunately, and I want to let people know that your website is AllisonCarmen.com. And, you want to give out any other information as far as, your podcast and things like that?
Sure. My two books are The Gift of Maybe and A Year Without Men, and they're available at all major bookstores and, of course, Amazon and online retailers. Like you said, my website is AllisonCarmen.com, CARMEN, and my podcast is 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And it's really a great podcast. It's only 10 minutes, but, it really tackles a mindset or a perspective, and it gives you so much hope. It reduces your stress and worry, and so it's really lovely, and it's free, and you can get it on Spotify and iTunes. And, my hope is that, again, the book I just wrote or any of my work just helps people love themselves more, have less stress, have less worry, and kind of find who they really are in this lifetime and really get to experience it, it's all its beauty and wonder. And again, the biggest takeaway again is our relationship with the unknown and being in maybe and accessing, our greatness, because we all have that. And thank you so much for, letting me come on tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you.
Well, it's been a delight to share with you as well, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again sometime in the future, because I think your information is well worth repeating and getting out there and helping other people to recognize that while we are works in process and progress, that the joyful expression of the spirit within is an adventure that is just amazing, and to celebrate it and not wallow in other stuff, but to get on with the joy of life. So I do thank you again, and I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to remind you that we're on YouTube and that and lots of other servers. You can find Nightlight just about everywhere. And the fact that the name of the show is Nightlight means that, we're trying to share a little bit of light in darkness sometimes. And if we've given you a ray of light to incorporate into your life, I'm so very delighted. Mark has a show on Tuesday, and we have another show on Thursday and another show on Friday. And, keep checking us out. YouTube has a follow button or a subscribe button, not prescribe. And do sign up to follow and be reminded of what we're doing, and that's how we know that you're listening. So I greatly would appreciate it if you would do that. Good night, everybody.